Hey everyone, today we're going to talk about Samadhi and maybe a little bit of how to practice it, but I also kind of want to make a whole video about the practice of Samadhi and what that means, how to do it, how generally one is taught how to do it, especially in the Kriya tradition. Today we're mostly just going to be describing like what is Samadhi? What are the different types of Samadhi? To get started, I would say that there are two main schools of thought on Samadhi. There's the Hindu school of thought. That's mostly what I'm going to be talking from, Hindu yoga school of thought. And then there's the Buddhist school of thought. And they talk about it a little bit differently. They frame it a little bit differently. They use different words, like jhana, formless jhana, and form jhana. But in yoga, we use words from the Yoga Sutras. Um, and so there are two types of samadhi in the Yoga Sutras, aren't there? Not four, two. And so what are those two main categories of samadhi? Those are sampragnata samadhi and asampragnata samadhi, also known as Sabija samadhi and Nirbija samadhi. So what do those words mean, right? They're kind of mysterious. Sabija samadhi, it means with seed, literally speaking. You could also think of it as with cause, and I'll explain that, or also with an object. So bija, what the seed is of the meditation is the object that you're using, that you're concentrating on. And nirbija is nir is without. Sa is with, nir is without. So, and nirbija means it's without a seed, it's without a cause, it's without an object. And what does that mean in practice? I would say let's start getting deeper into what is Sabija Samadhi more specifically, and then we'll start to understand what this means, what's a seed, what's a cause for meditation or a cause for Samadhi. And then we'll talk about Nirbija Samadhi in a little bit. So Sabija Samadhi has its own categories. And so some of those categories are Savitarka, Nirvitarka, Savichara, Nirvichara. There's four main categories that we can sort of use to describe Sabita Samadhi. And then there are also different aspects of what is happening in those different states, like what mental faculties are online. So getting started, what is Savitarka Samadhi? So, and let me backtrack a little bit. So these Savitarka and Savichara, they are in their own category. So there's Sabija, Nirvija. Then there is also gross Sabija and subtle Sabija. So you can imagine a tree, and there's two categories here, gross and subtle. The gross ones, that is where you'll find Savitarka and Nirvitarka. The subtle ones is where you'll find Savichara, Nirvichara. And so we'll start with the gross ones. And gross here literally just means a physical object that you can apprehend with your sense organs. And subtle refers to something internal that you can apprehend with your mind and create with your mind. But speaking on subtle objects, to give an example of what is going on in Savitarka, the more basic state of gross samadhi, you can imagine you have a candle flame as your object of focus, and there is no sensation of the body in this state. And that's one of the main features of samadhi is that there's no sensation of the body at all. It is formless in the sense that there is no body, there's no external sensation, and in the gross samadhi, there's no external sensation apart from the object of focus. And so what is it? With Savitarka, you're still really deeply analyzing, comprehending, thinking about all the different aspects of the object. So there's a flame, there's the visual appearance of the flame, you have, the knowledge of the word flame, and there's also the idea of the flame in your mind. And those are all kind of morphed and mixing together so that the idea of the flame, the word flame, and the image of the flame, they're all starting to merge as just one perceptual phenomena. And they're still almost like a trying to figure it out in a way, trying to really peer into the essence of the flame. And with Nirvitarka, there isn't so much of that. There isn't much contemplation of the flame. There's just the flame, and the mind loses its own nature in a way. It loses uh, the aspects of mind apart from the flame. There's the mind forgets that it's a mind and becomes the flame. If you can sort of put your headspace there, that the flame is just all there is in existence. So Nirvitarka is like that. It's just very concentrated, very absorbed. There's no ideas of the flame, not much thought about the flame, just the flame. And the subtle, going back to our tree, the subtle Sabija Samādhi with Sabicharta and Nirvicharta, they operate on the same sort of principle of analyzing and then not analyzing. But here, just the level of perception is different. So with Savicharta, the objects of focus are things more like consciousness, spaciousness, nothingness, the pure feeling of I am, I exist. Things like that are generally speaking considered to be subtle objects. They aren't perceived by the sense organs, but they're experienced internally. And another object, which is subtle, which the Kriya yogis will know, is the spiritual eye. It appears in meditation as a light, and you can use that as a subtle object of meditation. So if you can think about that in regard to subtle objects, with Savicharta, you are fully absorbed onto consciousness. We'll take that as an example. And there's no body, there's no sounds, no sensations, no smells, no tastes, right? And this is literal. It's not figurative. It's literal. There literally is no sense perception. There's the main cognition is consciousness, and you're sort of analyzing it, peering into it, contemplating it. But in Nirvichara, you get that just pure consciousness as it is. The mind takes on that nature and forgets that it is an analyzing instrument, and there's only that perception of consciousness with not much memory. Like as in memory, not much memory. What does it mean? It means you're not thinking of anything that happened before. It's raw, in the moment, fresh. This is the only object of cognition that is available. And so that sort of leads us into another point, which is some of the mental faculties that are and are not online. In the Yoga Sutras, Patanjali mentions 5 mental faculties that inevitably cease one by one as we approach Nirbija Samadhi, which is, a whole different ball game. I kind of like, yeah, like a light and a dark over here. So I have Sabija and Nirbija, two distinct categories. Um, so what are those mental activities? The first one, we have correct knowledge. The second one is incorrect knowledge. The third one is imagination. The fourth is sleep. Many people don't think of that as a mental activity, but Patanjali says yes, it's a mental activity. And the fifth one is memory. So all five of these will be gone in Nirbita Samadhi, but some of them are still online in Sabija Samadhi. And like we just discussed with Nirvichara Samadhi, there's no necessarily memory of prior events, but there's still correct knowledge about that object. There's a correct apprehension there. So there is this mental activity of perception, which can lead to the correct knowledge. So there's still cognition. There is still activity of the mind that is creating experience. But in Nirbija Samadhi, all mental activities are said to be in nirodha, in cessation. This is what Patanjali says. So what does that mean? Well, if all five of these are gone, that means the means to achieve those activities are also gone. So if you can imagine correct knowledge, what is the means to attain correct knowledge? Direct perception. So that means in Nirbija Samadhi, there is no direct perception. Because if there was direct perception, it could produce this mental activity of correct knowledge. Now, there is something to be said about what Nirbija gives you. It's not just a blank state where you just boom, boom, and nothing happens. Not the case. And this is primarily distinguished by the distinction that it is not sleep. Nirbija Samadhi is distinct from sleep, and the sutras make it very clear that these need to be separated, especially Vyasa's commentary on the sutras. And why is that? Well, sleep is colored, generated, and a modification of the three gunas. What are the three gunas? Those are sattva, rajas, and tamas. And those have distinct qualities that upon awaking, not awakening, you will feel restful, very calm. So it's colored by sattva. Or you'll feel very energetic. You'll feel ready to go. So it's kind of marked by rajas. Or you'll feel very sluggish, and very, not great sleep. You feel very lethargic. So it's marked by tamas. And there's no knowledge gained. So you might say, well, Amber, Vidasi, you just said that there's no correct knowledge in Nirbija Samadhi. What are you talking about? There's knowledge gained in Nirbija Samadhi. Well, this is quite a conundrum for many people to understand. However, it is a distinction between the state, the duration of the state of Nirbija Samadhi, and then coming out or going into Nirbija Samadhi. Those are different than the state itself. So the state itself, there's no direct perception, but because of the manner of entrance and the manner of exiting, there is either before or after an understanding of the transcendence of that state. And that understanding of the transcendence is carried out after the state. And that gives you sort of the knowledge of the transcendence of experience itself, and of almost you could say the unreality of experience, but it really shows you a deeper reality of experience. So that is one thing I do really want to highlight, though, about Nirbija Samadhi, is that it is a cessation of mental activity. And there are a couple ways, I think, in common language that we can use to talk about that. And I would say that there is consciousness in Nirbija Samadhi, but there's no experience. What do I mean? In Sabija Samadhi, there is consciousness and an object, and there's touching, there's contact, you could say. So that is generating a cognition, a cognized experience. But Nirbija Samadhi is consciousness without touching, without contact. It's not landing anywhere. And that is a real transcendent state. That is, it's not sleep. Sleep is full of ignorance. Nirbija Samadhi is open, unbounded transcendence. And this also gets into what that bija is getting at. So bija, or seed, you can think of a seed as the start of something, the cause of something. So sabija, the cause of the samadhi, the cause of the state, is the object of concentration, you could say. But nirbija samadhi is uncaused. It has no cause. There's nothing that produces that state. It is of the nature of transcendence itself. And there are some kind of ways you can imagine or think about practice to incline towards that state, but there's no object of concentration that will lead there necessarily. But there are objects of concentration that can lead to Sabija Samadhi. That's definitely true. But generally speaking, Nirbija Samadhi comes on when there is perfect detachment, desirelessness, when experience, even the highest samadhi, most blissful Sabija Samadhi, is looked upon with detachment. The mind naturally wants to cease. It naturally ceases. Because there's nothing which it has recognized in the phenomenal realm that can bring ultimate happiness. And so it ceases. It ceases through understanding into that transcendent state. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that like life is meaningless and can't find joy. No. But on an existential level, we're talking about liberation from suffering, liberation from samsara. And one of the principal first insights you realize that helps you get there is that ultimate satisfaction, ultimate realization, ultimate liberation cannot be grasped from something temporary. Liberation is not temporary. It cannot end. If it can end, it's not real liberation. If it's temporary, it can never satisfy you beyond the duration that it appears. And Sabija Samadhi is temporary. So that is an important lesson that you learn the more you experience Sabija Samadhi. And that helps build that detachment. But there are also other ways of building that detachment, which you may not have ever even experienced Sabija Samadhi before. And you are kind of preemptively detached from it. One way is bhakti, devotion, uh, love of God, taking up all your focus, understanding that the will of the universe, God, is the sole thing responsible for everything that happens, and we can't control it. Only God can control. So there's a surrender there, and even to the point where one's liberation is no longer something that's being grasped at. So automatically, like super fancy states aren't being grasped at. So you can imagine that there is a detachment there and a sort of selflessness, uh, that all those actions are being controlled by God, not the self. So there's a removal of doership, an understanding of non-doership, and that surrender, that detachment, that desirelessness can help spontaneously lead one into a Nirbija Samadhi. And one last point about Nirbija Samadhi is one main way to distinguish it from sleep is that, because sometimes people have a micro sleep in meditation, they fall asleep quick, everything went away, no body, no cognition, no experience, but nothing happens after. They don't feel changed, they don't feel different. I was asleep. It's just asleep. When Nirbija Samadhi happens, you get blown away. When you come back, there's an afterglow that for many people it can last, hours. You feel bliss, strong clarity, strong concentration, strong stillness of mind for hours, sometimes days, sometimes weeks, sometimes months. The power of these states is not something to underestimate. So that's something that is important to mention, that you'll know when Nirbija Samadhi happens because of those after effects, because of the knowledge gain, the insight into experience, into the nature of this reality that we are all apprehending. So, yeah, I hope that was informative. I hope I explained it clearly and you got something from it. Bye.